When, oh when, will people realize that relicensing a codebase never goes over smoothly? We can go back and look at cases like X3D6, which tried to move off of the MIT license, and amongst other things happening at the time, led to the creation of Xorg. We can look at more contemporary examples, or we can talk about the software in today's video, that being something Arch Linux made a news post about the other day, Valkey to replace Redis in the extra repository. This situation didn't happen recently. This was a year ago this happened, and since then, a bunch of distros, Arch Linux included, have been moving away from the Redis project over to Valkey. A high-performance key-value data store will be replacing Redis in the extra repository. This change is due to Redis modifying its license from BSD3 clause to RSAL v2 and SSPL v1 on March 20th, 2024. Arch Linux package maintainers intend to support the availability of Redis package for roughly 14 days from the day of this post. So, as of the recording of this, that would be about another 9 more days to enable a smooth transition over to Valkey. After the 14-day transition period has ended, the Redis package will be moved to the AUR. Also, from this point forward, the Redis package will not receive any additional updates and should be considered deprecated until it is removed. Users are recommended to begin transitioning their use of Redis to Valkey as soon as possible to avoid possible complications after the 14-day transition window closes. Now, whilst this situation isn't really new, right? It happened a year ago, a bit over a year ago now, like 13 months ago. I realized I'd never actually talked about it on this channel, and considering Arch is removing the package and going over to Valkey, this seemed like as good a time as any to go back and look at what actually happened. All of this began with this pull request. Change license from BSD3 to dual RSAL v2 plus SSPL v1. Read more about the license change here, linking to a blog post going over why corporate thinks that this is a great change to make. Now, the licenses in question. RSAL is the Redis source available license, and SSPL is the server-side public license. As should be pretty self-evident, the Redis source available license was made by Redis. This one, on the other hand, you can see it right here. This one came from MongoDB Inc., who did the exact same thing 6 years ago, going from AGPL to SSPL. Now, Redis is one of these very confusing changes to the non-FOSS and the non-techie people, where it looks open source, because there's a lot of people out there who don't know the difference between open source and source available. This is still being developed in that sort of open source manner where you have a public GitHub. Issues are being made, pull requests are being made, commits are being made directly to the repo, as opposed to just being a bulk uploads like you might see from an NVIDIA, for example. But don't be mistaken. These licenses, these ones here, these are not open source licenses. These are not free software licenses as defined by any of the free software organizations, the FSF, anyone else like that, and these are not open source licenses as defined by organizations like the Open Source Initiative. Now, in the justification, they use phrases like sustainably provide permissive use of our source code. Always be very concerned when you see this word right here, because what they were already doing is providing permissive use of their source code. That is the whole point of a BSD3 clause license. Maybe you'd argue it's not the most permissive, but it's a pretty permissive license. This is a very important adjective. Under the new license, cloud service providers hosting Redis offerings will no longer be permitted to use the source code of Redis free of charge. For example, cloud service providers will be able to deliver Redis 7.4 only after agreeing to licensing terms with Redis, the maintainers of the Redis code. These agreements will underpin support for existing integrated solutions and provide full access to forthcoming Redis innovations. In practice, nothing changes for the Redis developer community, who continue to enjoy permissive licensing under the dual license. At the same time, all the Redis client libraries under the responsibility of Redis will remain open source licensed. Redis will continue to support its vast partner ecosystem, including managed services and system integrators, with exclusive access to all future releases, updates, and features developed and delivered by Redis through its partner program. There is no change for existing Redis enterprise customers. Our new licensing approach strikes the best balance between making Redis source code broadly available, supporting the developer community with minimal limitations, and protecting our ability to continue investing in feature-rich, free-of-charge software and enterprise products. Now, the funny thing about all of this write-up is this post made 2,400 days ago. Redis will remain BSD licensed. So they were changing some licenses for the website, and people interpreted that as the license change of Redis itself, which, understandable, is not entirely clear what was happening at the time. But it was made clear at that point that Redis was still going to be BSD3 clause. At least until about a year ago. Redis is not a CLA project, and unlike other projects where they're pretty much mainly corporate developed, and by working at a company you're effectively signing a CLA or something equivalent to it where the company owns all of the work you do, with a proper open source project with no CLA, relicensing creates a problem. My contributions are made open source under the BSD license. You are not allowed to redistribute nor use them in source or binary forms without the original copyright notice and the BSD license. You must remove my contributions. My commit 11CD983 to allow Redis modules to function with modern compilers was also made under the BSD license, and permission is not granted for it to be used under any other license. Copyright for changes in this commit is held by my employer, Red Hat. And as can be seen from the downvotes on the original comment here, a lot of people were not exactly happy about this happening. So if there was a CLA, doing a full relicense would be very easy. The BSD3 clause license makes that a little bit challenging. In case you've never read it, let's have a look. Redistribution and use in source and binary forms with or without modification are permitted provided the following conditions are met. Redistribution of source code must retain the above copyright notice, this one here, this list of conditions, this here, and the following disclaimer, this one here. Basically, it must retain the license. 2. Redistributions in binary form must reproduce the above copyright notice, this list of conditions, and the following disclaimer in the documentation and or other materials provided with the distribution. So if you're giving a binary form of an application, the license must be in some form related to the project. You must be able to find it and see that this is the license it is using. And 3, neither the name of the copyright holder nor the names of its contributors may be used to endorse or promote products derived from this software without specific prior written permission. So if you make a fork, you can't say, oh, well, it was originally made by this person, so it's such a great project. Things like that. The last bit here is basically just saying, hey, you get the software if the software lights your computer on fire. That's not our fault. We just made the software. Deal with it yourself. Pretty much in legal speak is what it's saying. Now, note the fact that this is all of the terms, okay? And technically, the project is still BSD3 clause. There is this present in the project. Even to this day, this is still present. This is the BSD3 clause license with some additions stating that there is also additional licenses. Unlike some other licenses, there is no restrictions here about adding additional terms or adding additional license restrictions. So basically what they've done here is they have this BSD3 clause core, and this is not a unique thing, a lot of projects do this. They have this core that is open source, that everyone agrees is open source. However, you are not able to access that core because the core is wrapped up in this source available license nonsense, which are the actual terms that you need to follow. You can never access the open source part. And this is another bit of word trickery you can do. Technically, the project is still open source. It's still BSD3 clause. Except you just don't get access to that. I don't like that you can do this, but you technically can. There is nothing in this license stopping you doing so, and this is part of the reason that some people aren't a fan of these BSD-style licenses, because this has been done many, many times by proprietary projects. Now, every single time this happens, it is always unpopular. Now, again, depending on how corporate the project is, you might be fine. If everything's corporate, well, you own them anyway, so it doesn't matter. But if you have a very community-driven project with a lot of community developers, you know, people might start their own thing. Now, there's always going to be forks. And a lot of those forks just frankly don't really go anywhere because, well, a lot of people just don't have the knowledge or the time to continue a project like this. But there were two notable forks to mention. The first one being Redis. One of the two. This hasn't been updated in a couple of months. Early on, this was getting some attention, but, you know, it kind of just, like, stopped going anywhere. It's just kind of here as an archive now. The main one that people moved to, and not just random people started supporting, developers started supporting, but developers from the Redis project who were not happy about this change, not just like one-off little developers, but core developers who are part of the community, they moved over to Valkey. And this is one of those cases where this truly is the fork of the future. This is managed under the Linux Foundation. This isn't just like some one-off random developers who want to do a thing. No, like this is the main thing. This is a direct competitor to Redis now. Now, here's something real funny. So, remember how you saw this thing where they're like, oh, corporate people have to pay money to make use of Redis now. Oh, this is going to be so good for our project. And look, I'm sure it's made them quite a bit more money. The fun thing about this, though, is AWS, which offers pretty much anything that can make the money, they offer a thing which you can have the option of Redis or Valkey. And for Valkey, it's just cheaper. Like, the price per hour is just cheaper if you use Valkey, which I'm sure certainly helped the adoption of this project moving over to a fork. Basically, the TLDR of everything that happened here is Redis were like, these companies are making use of our open source project. They are taking advantage of us. And I've said before, I would like more companies to support open source projects, you know, if they're making millions and billions of dollars off it. So the company said, well, it's open source. We can just use it. Like, that's just how this model works. Redis, no, you can't do that. We're going to change the license. Community, well, guess let's make it open source again. Not every situation like this leads to a fork taking over the role that the original project did. Cite MongoDB, for example. There were forks, but none of them really took off. There were, like, you know, not really just the developer adoption of them. Valkey, though, well, whilst I showed you Arch Linux here, this is by no means the only distro completely dropping Redis, and I'm sure more companies are considering doing so as well. I think the best way to describe this entire situation is, F around and find out. Yeah. Anyway, if you liked the video, go like the video. If you really like the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, Scribes, the LiberaPay link in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and do it.
like this.